Hello, this is Angelia, and you're listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. The podcast that talks about human development and psychology to try and help you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. And last time we were talking about physical and cognitive development in young adulthood, and we're going to move on from there. If happiness is the absence of fever, then I will never know happiness. For I am possessed by a fever for knowledge, experience, and creation. That's from Diary of Ananias Nin. And I feel the same way. Hopefully you do too. We're going to focus on Arthur Ashe, tennis champion. The tennis champion Arthur Ashe was one of the most respected athletes of all time. Slim, bookish, and bespectacled, he was known for his quiet, dignified manner on and off the court. He did not dispute calls, indulge in temper tantrums, or disparage opponents. Like, there were other tennis players who definitely did that. He was a little more classy. The only African American to win the Wimbledon tournament and the United States and Australian Opens, Ashe grew up in Richmond, Virginia, where he began playing on segregated public courts and was barred from a city tennis tournament because of his race. Now, isn't that a shame? Probably one of the best tennis players, going in his day, and he couldn't play in a tournament because the city was segregated. I mean, I'm not racist against anybody because I'm multi-ethnic. I really can't be. I have friends from all over the world. So, and like I said, this book was written by a Latina and two Jews. So if there is anything in here that you find offensive, don't shoot the messenger. Talk to Houghton Mifflin. They wrote the book. But, I think that's a shame that anyone, is segregated. As a young adult, the only black star in a white-dominated game, Ashe was a target for bigotry, but he maintained his composure and channeled his aggressive impulses into the game. And that is a very good way to do these things. There's so much hate and aggression in the world today, and people take umbrage at every little word, and it's just ridiculous. If you want to be taken seriously, you need to learn how to compose yourself and to speak eloquently your point. Ashe used his natural physical gifts and stellar reputation to combat racism and increase opportunity for disadvantaged youth. So see, he gave back to his community. He knew it was hard for him, so he wanted to make it easier for the people who came behind him. And that's what I'm sitting here doing, myself. I knew it was hard for me, so I want to make it easier for, the ones coming, behind me. He conducted tennis clinics and helped establish tennis programs for inner city youngsters. Twice refused a visa to play in the South African Open, he was finally allowed to compete in 1973 and again in 74 and 75. So, during apartheid, he was so good a tennis player, he actually got to go and play. Despite South Africa's rigid apartheid system of racial separation, he insisted on non-segregated seating in his matches, and he was a big enough deal then that he got it, because they wanted the draw, which would give them that money. Ashe continued to work against apartheid, for the most part quietly, behind the scenes. Accused of being an Uncle Tom by angry militants who shouted him down while he was giving a speech, he politely rebuked them. What do you expect to achieve when you give in to passion and invective and surrender the high moral ground that alone can be brought to you by victory? He also believed that dialogue is the way to solve misunderstandings and problems, not taking up arms and getting too passionate about things. Several years later, He was arrested in a protest outside the South African Embassy in Washington, D.C. He felt tremendous pride when he saw Nelson Mandela, the symbol of opposition to apartheid, released from prison in 1990, riding in a ticker tape parade in New York City. I remember that. But Ashe would not live to see Mandela become president of South Africa. And I mean, that would have, pleased him very much, I think. In 1979, at age 36, at the height of a brilliant career, Ashe suffered the first of several heart attacks and underwent quadruple bypass surgery. Because remember, this was back in the day when people were still, cooking with lard and eating stuff like that. But, that we'll see later, that was not his problem. But forced to retire from competitive play, he served for 5 years as captain of the U.S. Davis Cup team. In 1985, barely past young adulthood, he was inducted into the Tennis Hall of Fame. So that's how good he was. One summer morning in 1988, Ashe woke up and could not move his right arm. He was given 2 options: immediate brain surgery or wait and see. He opted for action. Preparatory blood tests showed that he was HIV positive, probably from a blood transfusion during his heart surgery 5 years earlier. That was a very real problem that was happening, in the 80s. They weren't familiar with HIV before it started becoming, a big problem, and there was no testing for it here. And people were still getting blood transfusions and donations and things. And there were, more than a handful of people who got AIDS from, blood transfusions. The brain surgery revealed a parasitic infection linked to AIDS, which had progressed to AIDS itself. Like an athlete who is outscored but still in the game, Ashe refused to panic or to give up. Relying on the best medical knowledge, he chose to do all he could to fight his illness. He also chose to keep quiet about it, in part to protect his family's privacy, and in part because, as he insisted, "I am not sick." He played golf, appeared on the lecture circuit, wrote columns for the Washington Post, was a television commentator for HBO and ABC Sports, and composed a 3-volume history of African American athletes. So see, when he was sidelined, he didn't sit on his butt and do nothing. He got up and did some things that he was still passionate about. In 1992, when the USA Today planned to reveal his secret, Ashe called a press conference and announced that he had AIDS. He became a tireless leader in the movement for AIDS research, establishing a foundation and launching a $5 million fundraising campaign. Ashe died of AIDS-related pneumonia in 1993 at age 49, shortly before he had summed up his situation in his usual style. "I am a fortunate, blessed man. Aside from AIDS and heart disease, I have no problems." So, most of us would think those are pretty big problems, but that's kind of his attitude. He's like, man, other than that, I'm good. Arthur Ashe's characteristic way of coping with trouble or bigotry was to meet it as he did an opponent in the tennis court, with grace, determination, moral conviction, and coolness under fire. And that's the best way any of us can meet adversity. Again and again, he turned adversity into opportunity. Arthur Ashe was a can-do person. Even for people who lack Ashe's outstanding athletic skills, young adulthood typically is a can-do period, and it is. Oh my. It's hot here today. I can see I'm going to have a little asthma problem today. In our 20s, we are ready. We've come out into the world from our, adolescence, and we're ready to just go in there and do it all. Most people this age are on their own for the first time, setting up and running households and proving themselves in their chosen pursuits. Every day, they test and expand their physical and cognitive abilities. And we do. A lot of young people, they're out there still exercising or going to the gym or whatever, learning new things to, expand their horizons. They encounter the real world and find their way through or around problems of everyday living. And that's something you're going to have to do. You can be like water. When problems pop up, you can go around them, over them, down them. But, you got to be flexible in your life because stuff's going to happen. It's a fact of life. They make decisions that help determine their health, their careers, and the kinds of people they wish to be. Because, let's face it, if you eat cheeseburgers and fries all day long, you're not going to be that healthy, if you want to have a certain career, you're going to have to take the steps necessary to do that. And if you're not super happy with the person who you are and you want to be a better person, then you also have to take the steps necessary to do that. Health and physical condition. Your favorite spectator sport may be tennis, basketball, figure skating, or football. I always liked tennis better than the other ones. I did like baseball until all that, drug stuff started happening, and then we need more money. We're only making, $15 billion a year. It's like, dudes, really? Whatever it is, most of the athletes you root for are young adults, people in prime physical condition, and that's usually true. Usually, by the time an athlete is like 40 or whatever, it's getting be time for them to retire. They just can't keep it on like the younger fellas or ladies. Young adults typically are at the peak of health, strength, energy, and endurance. Like I said, that's typical, but not necessarily. There are unhealthy people in their 20s and there are healthy people in their 70s. So they are also at peak of sensory and motor functioning. By the middle 20s, most body functions are fully developed. So, you're a firm adult by the time, you're 25 in most cases. Visual acuity is keenest from about age 20 to age 40. So that's when, you're going to be able to see the best. Taste, smell, and sensitivity to pain and temperature generally remain undiminished until at least age 45. So once you hit 45, that's the medical version of you're getting ready to go down the hill. Sorry. I know y'all heading towards that hill. Probably didn't want to hear that. I'm already over that hill by quite a few years. But however, a gradual hearing loss, which typically begins during adolescence, becomes more apparent after 25, especially for higher pitched sounds. And that is the thing that a lot of men have. They have problems hearing higher pitched sounds, and if that's something you've got going on, go ahead and go to the doctor, get the hearing test. I'm fussing at my husband and son all the time because they're, what? It's like, no, get your hearing fixed. I'm tired of repeating myself. Health status. Most young adults in the United States are in good to excellent health. Less than 6% of 25 to 44-year-olds call their health fair or poor. And I know when I was that young, I was still in pretty good health. Mine started to go pretty bad in my 40s. I had a child. I have what the doctor and my father agreed with, boy hips. I don't have an expanse of hips. I have boy hips. And when I had my kids, I grew out instead of that way. That created problems for my spine and my pelvis, and the tops of my legs. So, I love the boys. I wouldn't trade them for the world, but it did have some impact on me. Many are never seriously ill or incapacitated. Excuse me, I got a little itch under the braid here, under the bun. Oh gosh. Okay, they're never incapacitated until they have no chronic conditions or impairments. The most common chronic back pain, which may be work related. And of course, I think we all know that back pain is work related. My back went out working at the daycare. There was this 60-pound 2-year-old who fell off the ladder going up to the changing table. I caught her. As I caught her, I heard the back go clack, 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 clack. And I was in pretty serious pain and didn't have the insurance, couldn't afford the surgery, just had to lay down, for 6 weeks. And of course it didn't heal perfectly. I still have clack problems and, there's disc problems. I have degenerative disc disease now. When I worked in a nursing home, I hurt the knees and the hip a little bit. So work will work on you. If you have a physical job at all, it's going to work on you. And that's just the fact of life, At the time, I had no education. I was told I had to get out of the house when I was 18, and they couldn't afford college for me, so that's what I did. I didn't start college until I was probably 34 years old. So, and like I said, it took me 13, 14 years to get through, whereas other people might only take, 8 to 10, because I had to take classes as I could afford them, and I couldn't afford them much, because I was a single mom for 8 years at that time. So, life happens. Accidents are the leading cause of death for Americans aged 20 to 34, followed by homicide and suicide. These three causes account for 72% of deaths in the early 20s and 51% among 25 to 34-year-olds. So accidents not only can happen, they do happen, and that is, why we have seat belts and don't drink and drive, and, think, you don't watch these shows that show people doing these funny things, and then try to do it when you could break your neck or, anything else. Death rates for young adults have been nearly cut in half during the past half century, and mortality rates for other age groups have dropped as well. And that's because of the safety measures we have, and people telling people, yeah, don't do stupid stuff. If that's not something you tell your kids, you need to tell them that, don't do stupid stuff. Like my parents, you say, if they all jumped off the bridge, would you too? And that's not going to carry any weight with them, honestly. But if people are jumping off the bridge, hey, you could hit the bottom, break your legs, you could hit your head and break your neck. My father actually dove into some water when he was drunk that he thought was deep, and it was like this deep. Ended up breaking his neck. His buddies thought he was joking because they were all drunk too, and he ended up driving himself to the hospital with a broken neck. So people do stupid things, and sometimes alcohol and drugs are the cause. Heart disease, strokes, and most other life-threatening diseases are down. So that's good. Because we're learning, you are what you eat. If you're putting only sugar in you, you're going to get diabetes. If you're putting only fat in you, you're going to have heart disease. On the other hand, too many adults, even young ones, are overweight and not active enough and engage in health-threatening behaviors. So that's important to talk to your kids about, because, you want them to grow up to be adults and, people who are grown. So you need to talk to them about, health. In young adulthood, the foundation for physical functioning throughout the lifespan is laid. So what they're doing when the kids is going to affect them when they're older. Excuse me. Although health may be in part influenced by genes, behavioral factors, what young adults eat, whether they get enough sleep, how physically active they are, and whether they smoke, drink, or use drugs, contribute greatly to present and future health and well-being. So you need to talk to your kids about how to be healthy. You need to talk to them about drugs, alcohol, smoking. So you can curb this stuff, hopefully, so that they can have longer, healthier lives when they're adults. Genetic influences on health. The mapping of the human genome is enabling scientists to discover genetic bases for many disorders, from obesity to certain cancers, notably lung, prostate, and breast cancer, to mental health conditions such as alcoholism. And I know in our family we had 3 people die from alcoholism related, issues. So it's a thing. And so I talk to my kids about that and say, don't drink, to get drunk. If you want to have a beer with the guys after work or whatever, okay, that's fine. But don't get drunk, because this happened in our family. It is genetic. And I don't want you to die like the uncles or the cousin did. So I do not want this in your life. Most diseases are multifactorial, involving both genetic and environmental causes. An example is non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, which affects about 4% of the world's population. And it is growing because everything has sugar or corn syrup in it now. My doctor, I borderline diabetic. I got my A1C down, over 8 points. He's like, whatever you do, do it. But I cut out the sodas because if you look at those sodas and they got your percentage of your daily allowance or whatever, that's one soda alone is like 110 to 140% of your allowance for sugar a day. So that means if you drink that soda, you can't eat anything else that has any sugar in it for the rest of the day. And there are things that have natural sugar in it, like some, of course your bread has sugar in it, but you should be eating whole wheat or oat nut or whatever anyway. But, any fruit has natural sugar in it. So if you're drinking soda every day, just one soda, that's not counting people who drink 5 and 6 a day, one soda a day puts you over your sugar limit for that day. And when I looked at that and figured that out, I stopped drinking those every day. Now, do I have one every now and then when I go out, on a date or whatever? Yes, I do. Of course I do. But it's a treat. I consider it a treat now, not something that I do every day. Researchers have found a gene on chromosome 2 that contributes to susceptibility to this disease in Mexican Americans. And I heard a man, he is a Mexican American, who said, yeah, Mexicans love sugar. And if you look in, like the Mexican Coke, my son used to drink that, and you look at that, that's got a lot more sugar than American Coke does. But that's what he said. He said, yeah, he said, all this good food with all this sugar, we love it. But health-wise, it's not good for you. And like I said, my mom and my grandma passed from complications of diabetes. And so that's not how I want to go. So I'm trying to manage that and nip that, before it gets to that point. However, the single most important prediction of this type of diabetes is obesity. I'm technically in the obese range. They've changed it over the years. Used to be, you had to be 100 pounds to be obese. Now it's like, oh no, if you're 40 pounds, you're obese. And, it changes. But, there's a funny joke about that. My mom, when they started first doing this obese thing, and she went to the doctor and we were kids, and, she said, he said I was obese. And my brother said, I'd be mad too if he called me an old beast. Because kids are awesome, kids are awesome. Other behavioral factors such as a lack of exercise, poor nutrition, and smoking also contribute. So, make sure the kids are going out. Like I said, we had outside, run around and play time, for half an hour. Make sure they're eating healthy foods. Yes, you're going to want to give them a little treat every now and then, but let that be every now and then, not every day. Because I remember when I was younger, I used to treat myself every day. So, stuff happens. Risk factors for atherosclerosis, or narrowing of the arteries, which may begin in childhood and can become a threat by the 40s or 50s, include high blood pressure, smoking, and elevated cholesterol levels in the blood. Now, my husband has that. He's got less than 50%, of that going on. He's already had a stroke and suffered some brain damage from the stroke. So that's something we're trying to manage, because his mother's had a few strokes, and she has dementia, and, we're trying to manage his condition so that he doesn't end up quite so bad. Cholesterol, in combination with proteins and triglycerides, fatty acids, circulate through the bloodstream carried by low-density lipoprotein, or LDL, commonly called bad cholesterol. High-density lipoprotein, HDL, or good cholesterol, flushes cholesterol out of the system. So, if you're eating a lot of cholesterol, that's going to be a problem. I know I've had it in the past. I've had a few hard episodes of high cholesterol. And we figured out, that you can actually eat anything, but you still have to make good choices. They make 0 cholesterol butter. They make 0 cholesterol, like, cream cheese. They make vegan cheese that's not even real cheese, but it tastes like real cheese. So you can still have the things you like. There's some good veggie burgers, out there, or you can get extremely lean ground beef, or, ground chicken, turkey, whatever. So you can still eat like you want to eat. You just have to make good choices for yourself, so you're not putting, a bunch of cholesterol into your body, which is going to stay in your arteries, and then it's going to kill you someday. Excuse me. An estimated 80% of the variation in HDL levels within the population is due to genetic factors. So if it's running in your family, you're more at risk for it. So, pay attention. However, cholesterol levels also are influenced by behavioral factors. So even though you're genetically predisposed, if you're chowing down on the burgers and fries every day, that's not genetic, is it? That's your behavior. Behavioral influences on health and fitness. Good health is not just a matter of luck. People can seek health by pursuing some activities and refraining from others. In a longitudinal study of 7,000 adults aged 20 to 70, health was directly related to several common habits: eating regular meals, including breakfast, and not snacking, eating and exercising moderately, sleeping regularly over 7 to 8 hours each night, not smoking, and drinking in moderation. Of course, we've been told this time and time again, but at some point you need to listen. Don't let it be a wake-up call one day like I had. It's like, this is fine for me, I do what I want. And like, wait, what was that? That felt funny. Until then it started feeling not so funny. And then my husband, he says something's wrong. My hand, I can't feel my hand. It's like, okay, time to go in the emergency room. So, you need to probably regulate before it gets to that point. After 10 or more years, people who did not follow these health habits were twice as likely to be disabled as people who followed most all of them. And I'm just going to tell you, I know a lot of people who I went to school with who smoked, and almost all of them ended up with some form of lung cancer, stomach cancer. I mean, I hate to say it, I'm not trying to be judgmental, but smoking is one of the worst things you can do to yourself. It really is. I had an uncle who died of lung cancer, and he had stopped smoking like 20 years before. So, it is just one of the worst things you can do to yourself. Preventative measures can pay dividends. Regular screening tests, such as pap smears to detect cervical cancer, and testicular self-exams to detect testicular cancer, can prevent diseases or catch them in early treatable stages. Pap smears for cervical and testicular for testicular. I hope that I said that right, because we don't need pap smears for testicular cancer, do we? That's, yeah, it's just too hot here, I'm telling you what. So yeah, if you get your screenings, they can see things before they get really bad, and nip it in the bud, as the saying goes. So that's where I'm going to leave you for today, and I hope that helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program so we can spread it around the world. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. That's all for now. Until next time.